We all have a good rest? Or did everyone sleep like Father John Wall? He told us he slept like a baby. Slept for an hour, cried for an hour, slept for an hour. etc. Anyone feel like dancing before we begin?
Yes.
Why not? Dancing? 33. I danced in the morning when the sun was begun. I danced in the moon and the stars and the sun. Where's my singers? I danced on the earth and burned the my hand, my earth. Everyone. Dance, dance, wherever you may be. I am the Lord of the dance, said he, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said he. As for the scribes and the Pharisees, they would not dance and they wouldn't follow me. I danced for the fishermen of James and John. They came with me and the dance went on. Everyone. Dance, dance, wherever you may be. I am the Lord of the dance, said he, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said he.
Peter brought them over. I don't know where he got that.
I danced on the Sabbath and I cured the lame. The holy people said it was a shame. They whipped me, stripped me, and hung me high. They left me there on the cross to die. Dance, dance, wherever you may be. I am the Lord of the dance, said he. I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said he. I danced on a Friday when the sky turned black. It's hard to dance with the devil on your back. They buried my body and they thought I'd gone, but I am the dance and I still go on. Dance, dance, wherever you may be. I am the Lord of the dance, said he. I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said he. Last verse. Cut me down and leave not high. I am the light that will never, never die. I'll live in you and I'll live in me. I am the Lord of the dance, said he. Dance, dance, wherever you may be. I am the Lord of the dance, said he. I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said he. Praise the Lord! No, that's not church. What a beautiful way to begin today, by dancing. I guess that will lead us into this morning session. We'll call upon Father John Wall, and the rest of the panel. Sarah. Sarah has because she's not here. Bernice, are you here? Bernice? Oh, she's here.
You want to start, Sarah?
Are we?
Sarah? You want to start?
Sarah. There is she. I'm not sure. We'll tell our story. And the bishop has not arrived.
This morning is, good morning everybody,
Good morning, John.
one of the most difficult topics that I think we could ever discuss on a morning like this is the story yet to be told about the native church. The reason I say it's the most difficult because I'm not very good at prophecy. Very recently I had a friend of mine die, and about 3 years ago I said to her doctor, I said, how long has she got to live? And he looked at me and said, sorry Father, I flunked my course in prophecy. All I can do is begin to suffer some of the many ways that the issue of a native church can be looked at. And I'd like to start with the most difficult way. And that's to say that the native church can never exist. The reason I say that the native church can never exist is because we don't have a category in the church for the idea of a native church. So if I were to look at the idea in the most difficult light, it is that there cannot be a native church. There's no such thing as a native church, so it can't be. And since I too flunked my course in prophecy, I don't want to start by saying, but someday there will be a native church, because that's not possible either. If I were to begin to say to you, as I said to someone earlier this morning, one of the most influential books in my life was a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, you would look at me and say, you've got to be kidding. No, I'm serious. It was written by a fellow called Robert M. Pirsig, P-I-R-S-I-G, and it was entitled, I remember 15 years ago I was still thinking that I was going to change the world. So when a book came out with the title Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, I decided to buy it. And I didn't put it down for 3 days, and I read it and reread it and reread it for 3 days and kept saying to myself, what is he saying? What he was saying was that our way of thinking about the world has to change rather dramatically from the scientific way of proving things exist to becoming romantics again, to saying that Ron Boyer loves people, Willie Commando loves people, I love people, Peter loves people, and you know, it's true, we love people. That's not the science's way of proving that we love people. They've got to quantify it. They've got to say that this is the premise, here's the next premise, and here's your conclusion. What I found in reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance was that we don't have to deal with quantity, we deal with quality. And so for the past 15 years in trying to think of church, I keep thinking of the values of church and the need to make those values quality values. And I live in a world that still thinks of quantity. If we're very successful, we have the new Lexus that's selling at $62,000. And the Lexus was so popular in the past 2 years or 3 years as a car that now they have a trimmed down model so everybody can have the name Lexus, but you're only going to pay $34,000. So it's quantity again. And we label that quantity and we don't think about anything but proving that it has quantity. I have problems with the fact that we live in a world that keeps telling me that unless I buy more and have more, I am not going to be able to be a human being. And I struggled with that and struggle with that because if it's difficult in a native culture, it's even more difficult outside of the native culture where we've lost all sense of quality. I began to look at the fact that if it's true that there is only quality that we need in our lives and we need values, I had to wait 15 years for Robert M. Pirsig to write his second book. And I picked it up last weekend and spent the weekend reading it. It's called Leela. And this time he's talking about the fact that we can't think in objective and subjective categories, He says, he uses the name Phaedrus as the narrator of his books. He says, when I came to the point of understanding quality 15 years ago, I didn't know why we couldn't have values and we couldn't have morals. And we couldn't because we again had these lost categories of subjective and objective truth. And he says that in the difficulty of finding values and of quality, there is somebody who falls between the cracks, and that's our native people, who don't think subjective and objective, but think quality and think values. That was frightening to understand, that I was in a world that was going to respect the red nation, and that the white nation had nothing any longer to offer. Nothing. I was frightened that I too had lived my life, soon to be 50 years old, half century, and to discover that Ron tells me at 49 you become an elder. And so as a fledgling young elder, I dare share with you that when I ask that serious question, can we have a native church, the most difficult answer I have to say to you is no. No, if it's going to be put into those categories that we have of quantity, quality, subjective, objective, the native church cannot exist. It just cannot fit. It just will never be able to find the right question for the other cultures and the other worlds to say yes to it. I just don't know how. I have looked at the fact that Juliana of Norwich, who was having incredible visions of God, who spoke in this mystic language of her being in the vision of God, and she reached out with a hazelnut in her hand, and she said, the whole of the God of whom I have visions and have spoken to and lived in the intimacy of his interior life, that whole God is in the hazelnut. That whole God is in the hazelnut. And I wondered then if the question wasn't whether there can be a native church or there can't be a native church, than to say there is a native church. There is a native church. It's not whether there can be or whether I'm going to foretell the future, but I have to find new categories for me to understand as a white person what the native person is saying. In a wonderful book that I was given as a gift, The Death Feast in Din Lahamid, and very fortunately Ron had it autographed by We Sikhs for me, and I treasure the book. But in the court case, to be able to solve the land claims, there is one line that strikes me. It says, in Delgamude versus the Queen, the provincial government dismisses the Gitsan Adoks as a mere collection of folk tales. A mere collection of folk tales. Because you have to be subjective and objective. They are simply folk tales. And I come to the human experience of my life, and I come to the human experience of all of our lives, and I ask myself, if I rid myself of the category subjective, objective, and if I rid myself of quantity versus quality, then I begin to say to myself, how do I respond as a white person to the experience that I have as a human being? And what symbols do I have that help me interpret my human experience so that it has meaning, You know, as a Catholic priest, I celebrate the Eucharist, which is the greatest moment of, as I said, to say Nyawagoa Miigwech to God. And the symbol of Christ dying and rising and giving me new life and giving the community new life is no longer symbolically real. There is no reality to that. It's in our imagination. There's an objective. This is my body and blood. There is a subjective for some people, believing that Jesus is present and therefore changing their life, but being the symbol that changes the community and transforms that human experience each time we celebrate into a religious experience, into a spiritual experience. If it's not lost, it is almost lost. Almost lost. I look in the white culture for the symbols that might give meaning to death, as was so well explained by Alma yesterday. And I ask myself, what is the meaning that we give to death in the white culture? When my friend died 2 weeks ago, I spent 2 full days in the funeral home, and I had a great number of opportunities to speak to the funeral director. In white culture, he is now saying that there are 2 kinds of funerals: traditional funerals and what he called direct dispositions. And I said to him, what is a direct disposition? He says, that's when I receive a phone call saying, my mother has died in such and such an old people's home. Would you pick up the body, bury it, and send me the bill? Une disposition directe. And he said, 15 years ago when he was in the funeral business and there would be a tragedy of a suicide, a 15 or 16-year-old committing suicide, even he as the funeral director would take a deep breath and say, my God, what are we ending up, what are we doing? He says now they're twice a week. We have young people and old people committing suicide in the white culture. 40 to 45% of people in this province have just been said to be des décrochés. 40 to 45% of our young people are leaving high school never to return to the educational system. 40 to 45%, and we are the worst in the world. The worst in the world. And so in my white culture, I say to myself, if we are looking at death as a direct disposition, just pick up the body, bury her, that's my mother. What am I going to do as a symbol of life and death to give meaning to my human experience? I don't know. I have no symbol anymore. When I look at the fact that in my human experience I have to give meaning to it, or I too will one day, whether it's at 85 or 95, I too will contemplate suicide. I look around me and suicide is everywhere. Elderly are now committing suicide simply by going to 3 or 4 different doctors, getting medication from all 3 or 4 doctors, putting them in the medicine cabinet with a little bit of Alzheimer's. They're saying, oh, well, that's it. And the 4 bottles of pills prescribed by 4 different doctors are taken, and the elderly person is carried to the grave. I look at my friend Dennis Hadley and his wife Lucille and sister Cote at Nazareth House in Montreal. And they walk the streets picking up people who haven't slept in a bed for 30 years. 30 years. And they pick up this poor person and they carry him home and put him in a bed, and maybe for the last 3 days of his or her life they sleep in a bed, and for the first time they get 3 meals, and they have someone to hold their hand and to wipe their brow. And last year we went out for a campaign for $200,000 and we didn't get the money because that's not an important symbol in our white culture anymore, how you bury your dead. They started a house for the elderly who are dying of cancer, and the cancer is growing through their bodies with sores emanating from their bodies. And people don't want to pay $300,000 to buy a house to put up just 10 old ladies who are going to die anyway. And I worry about what symbols we have in our society that might be able to speak and give meaning to human existence. I'm not talking about church now, I'm talking about human existence. And then the straw that broke the camel's back. Dennis said he has 7 priests and religious who are coming to see him, and they are HIV positive. And he would like to open a house so that these priests, when they are dying, still have the dignity of celebrating Mass without everybody judging them for whatever reason that they got AIDS. Well, keep that one quiet, because if the world finds out that priests have AIDS, we have no meaning to the church anymore. And so we have no symbols to sustain us in our weakness and in our weakest moments. We have nothing. In a day-to-day routine, I talk to people from every walk of life, and I meet them in the white culture, from being presidents to street cleaners, and they're all lonely. They have no one to talk to, no one that loves them. What about your wife, your kids? I don't have time for them. They don't have time for me. They did an experiment in the United States last year. They put a microphone on mother and father in a family of 5 children. And for 2 weeks, they carried the microphone around. And the children were averaging 3 minutes of time with their parents per week. 3 minutes of time with their parents per week. That's what I mean saying, Willie, will you talk to me? I don't mean, let's all sit down and have supper. Let's all sing. That's not, I mean, for me. 3 minutes a week for me. And we can refer to the life stories of a people as being a collection of folk tales. When I say there can be, and there has to be, and there is a native church, it's because every time I contact the native church, I hear a million symbols coming alive. Symbols that some of which I didn't have as a child. I don't have now as an adult. But when I hear native spirituality, I hear and I remember the first time that I met your cousin Dominic, Ron. And we were at the Anishinaabe Center. And he had taken tobacco and put it on the top of the drum for the Feast of the Dead. And as the drummers drummed for time after time after time after time, I said to Dominic afterwards, why the tobacco? And he said the tobacco is put on the top of the drum so that at each beat we are reminded to pray for the dead. And you know what? When we go to look at the drum, when the drum beat is finished, there's no tobacco, because the Spirit has accepted that tobacco and has told us that our prayer has been accepted. And he held in his hand the piece of tobacco, and he told us for 25 minutes the meaning of tobacco and the symbol of tobacco in the native culture and the native spirituality. And as a Catholic priest, I wondered if I stood there, would I be able to talk to you for 25 minutes on the cross and on Jesus? And I wondered, could I actually just hold the cross and talk about the meaning of this symbol for 25 minutes? And I look at the fact that what I have learned of sweetgrass is not sweetgrass. What Ron said about his feather is not his feather, it's the prayers that come with it. But when I look at the symbol of sweetgrass and purification, it's not just purification of my soul, it's a purification of my eyes, my nose, my mouth, my ears, my arms, my body. And you know, I live in a culture where, at least when I grew up, I knew that I put Jesus on that cross. And it was the body that brought me salvation. Today we've taken the body off and we put it into Playboy, but we forgot it on the cross. And so our culture doesn't have a symbol of the body yet. We don't know what to do with the body yet. We make money with it, we have porno films with it, we have nude dancers with it, but we don't know what to do with the body as an instrument of salvation yet. And the native people do. Native people do. When they talk about the sweat lodge, that's the body, that's the pain, that's the sweat, that's the body wrapped with pain. And I remember Cardinal, when he had just designed the Museum for Human Civilization, the night before he accepted to build the building as the Building for Human Civilization, he went to a sweat lodge. And he said when it was that moment when he knew that he could no longer take one more moment of that sweat lodge, that he could hardly crawl through the door, then he knew that what he would do would be acceptable to the Creator, and that his building would be a building that would be of great recognition of the Creator. And what do? We abuse the body the night we build something by getting drunk. We abuse the body in our society with drugs. We abuse the society with licentiousness and permissiveness and promiscuity because we don't know yet what to do with our body. I look to some of the symbols, and I can remember especially the symbol of the prayer to four directions. And it was the day that we had set as October the 26th, as a day of reconciliation between natives and non-natives. And I celebrated the Eucharist here in Ganawagi. And I can remember turning for the first time to the prayer for four directions. And it wasn't out there anymore, it was inside of me, and I got scared. The symbol was not a symbol, it had become part of my heart, and I couldn't ever think that I would pray without praying to the four directions. In a wonderful little legend, that is the truth, listen to this. It's called O Soul of the World. The music in the river returns to my studio and runs within the music which plays here all day and into night. Music magnifies the aboriginal sound. It plows my soul, upturns my earth, reaches into ever deeper levels to dig out and irrigate the innermost memories. The great, gorgeous sound enters the deepest well where live the fish with the largest eyes and lures images from the depths. Music verifies all I have understood about the searing matrix and the searing beauty of the matrix. Juliana of Norwich said that in that hazelnut is the fullness of the God who was an incredible God of whom she had visions. I listen to the native people, I read their legends, and I see the symbols that give meaning to their human existence. And they aren't mine, and sometimes I wish they were. I wish again that I could not walk through the asphalt jungle and wonder where I'm going to park this car of mine, but that I walk through nature and begin to take a blade of grass and again see the whole of the Creator. I would like again to be able to touch and to feel Mother Earth and to know that just a pause in Mother Earth for an hour or two could again purify me and liberate me and free me. And what's so sad is that the church that has all those symbols is slowly letting them go away. That the church that I love and the church that I care for and the church that I work for has complementary symbols that can be of as beautiful as the beauty of the native spirituality that we have. And when we talk about Mother Earth, we talk about death. And when we talk about coming out of the sweat lodge, we talk about resurrection. When we talk about planting the seed, we talk about growth. When we talk about protection, we talk about the Little Prince. And that wonderful story of the Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. You know what he says, eh? The man comes from another planet and he comes to this world. And he's the only thing he has is a rose. And he walks through this earth and he sees a whole garden of roses and he's depressed. And he sits by the side and he begins to cry. And the animal comes up to him and says, "Why are you crying?" He said, "Because I thought this was the only rose, it was my only possession in another planet. And look, there was a whole garden of roses." And the wolf says, "But you cared for it. You watered it. You looked after it. Your rose is not like any other rose. Not like any other rose." And then the wolf says, "And remember that what is important is invisible to the eye." And he repeats it. What is important is invisible to the eye. To me, one of the great wonders of our time is that a moment when we could lose all our symbolism in a church that has such rich symbolism, that if we look again to the native people we will be able to enrich and give life to our symbols. It is my profound conviction that symbols are alive and they can die. They can die. Talk to our native people who had those symbols taken out of their life, where sweetgrass no longer could be burned, where they couldn't wear their hair in braids, where they no longer had the unity of mind, heart, and spirit. And those symbols began to die. And they almost died, but they didn't. In the white culture and in our church, our symbols have almost died. Almost died. Because our symbols need, what the native people will tell you, a community. And until we come together as a community of faith, those symbols will sit there, but they will have no life. No life. Is there a church, a native church? You bet. Can the whole church learn from the native church? You bet. And I will simply leave you with one of the wonderful stories of Gladys Taylor when she says this. She talks about two sticks and a fire. And she talks about these two sticks and a fire, and she says when you reach in with the two sticks and you take off the coal, the moment you place the coal beside the fire, soon it goes into cold, dark, and useless coal. But the moment you take your two sticks again and you put that coal back on the fire, it becomes radiant with heat very quickly. And it stays warm and it becomes part of the fire. And she says this, the story of the two sticks and the coal is to remind us of this, that apart from the circle of fire, we will die, and our symbols will die. But when you put that coal back on the fire, immediately it becomes part of the fire, and it becomes warm. And she says this, we are a strong people if we stay together. If we gather in the circle of fire, we will find out how to thank our Creator. Outside the fire, there will be no you, and there will be no Creator. Is there a native church? Yes, there is. Can we recover the strength of our symbols in the church in death and resurrection, in baptism? Do we have to fight traditionals against Catholics and against Protestants? No. To be given a name is wonderful, absolutely incredible. It touches the very soul of being a native person. And to be given a name in Jesus Christ is to give you a new place, not a different place, a new place, a new way of giving meaning to your very existence as a native person. And the Eucharist is nothing more than the gathering together of God's people, all of the Creator, to be able to say Nyawa to God. And when we are married in that light, we come to build up the people, to build up the church. Is there a native church? I sure hope so.
You know, it kind of hurts me at this point. We're coming together to share our stories with one another. And the thing is, we had no way, we had no response of who would be coming. Otherwise, we would have been more prepared. We have 3 of our Innu brothers that are of the Montagnais that are present, and they're here in spirit, but they're unable to understand what's going on. They speak in another language. If we had someone that maybe has that gift of tongue that I lack, you know, kind of just sharing along a bit of what's transpiring. I do believe we have someone for that. Good, thanks, sorry about that. Now we can become church. We are church. At the registration table we had valuation sheets, and we'd ask each and every one of you to browse through them and make your comments. If there's more paper needed, we'll provide it. And like Father John said, if we are to become a church, we have to know. There are many of our people, and there's many of your people that are not in church because they don't seem to find their place. We had a workshop in the diocese a year ago on enculturation. And we had a Father Cote, an oblate priest from St. Paul's University. And he put it quite bluntly. The need for an identity, the need to know who you are. And he himself didn't realize. He was a Franco-American. Didn't know how to speak French. But yet he said, as Father John said, we can come close to losing our symbols, our identity. But it remains, it's like a kink in the neck. It's not really gone, but it's there. And that was shared to me by a few friends this weekend. How the Spirit is the one who brings forth of what is within us. We are all born with that Spirit of the Creator within our hearts. It is what we do with it, what we nurture to make it come real, strong working within us. And it's very important. Then we can understand what church means. Too much confusion is about the size of the church we have, the color of it. But we forget about the inside. We forget about the people coming. This is the church right here. My people in Northern Ontario are developing their churches like a teepee, in a circle. We always had a secret circle so we wouldn't be caught in the corners. John spoke of taking the ember out of the fire and going cold. And this is the purpose why we always gather for years and years, our elders, in sacred circle. Because in the circle we have unity. We have strength. Alone we are weak. And yet we always kept an opening in that circle for someone to come in at the 11th hour. And in that circle, before we begin the ceremonies, before we begin our spiritual gatherings, before we begin any gathering, we would purify that circle. Before we begin anything in any community, even today, we ask for protection, we purify the community. And why do we purify that circle? So we won't have the influence, interruption of that wandering spirit that's up to no good. And as we leave that opening in a circle, the elder would go around with tobacco. And that would be the doorway to close that opening. And it would always be open to someone to come. And this is what Jesus taught. He spoke about this farmer that went out and hired people at 8 o'clock in the morning. He gave them a pay that he agreed to. Then he went out at dinner and he hired more and he paid them the same amount. At the 11th hour, he went out in the street and did likewise. And he paid them all. After everyone was paid, the ones who began the earliest were angered. How come they would get the same? I can only refer that as a circle. The importance of our coming together to grow together and help each other to redeem ourselves. The 11th hour reminds us of the Father looking out in the field. Tears in his eyes. Wait, come on. I guess in our circle we had our own ways of sharing these teachings. I used to say it's similar to what's written in the scriptures, or it's parallel, but it isn't. It's the same. The same God, the same Creator, who dwells in each and every one of us, only speaks in many languages, speaks in a way that the Innu can understand, speaks in a way that we're able to interpret. But all the time, the same Spirit. Why do we need a native church? I had some pamphlets there on a book called Friends of God. That was written recently by a Jesuit brother in Guelph. After going through the Jesuit journals, Jesuit relations, he came upon a person almost forgotten, but through the efforts of a Montrealer, former Montrealer, Bishop Alec Carter, who helped us see our dream come true, a vision of a new church. John and Rebecca, the early missionary, said, "It is time that we draw forth from your communities leadership." And that happened. And he sent the first evangelists to cross the continent into Washington State. And they're a group of Mohawks spreading the good news of the risen Christ. But when the missionaries first arrived, they had difficulty with this Bible they carried. They were speaking of kingdoms, castles, mansions. And the poor Indians were looking, what is all this about? We have a teepee, we have a canoe. And yet there was a man chosen by the Spirit of God by the name of Joseph Chiatinwa. And this is what the book is about. And it was through the efforts of Bishop Alec Carter of Sault Ste. Marie Diocese, where I originally come from, that he listened to the voice of the Indian people as we returned reluctantly, grudgingly, to the Martyr Shrine in 1981 because of how we were portrayed toward early missionaries as murderers. So there was a need for healing. Then we started to gather. We gathered under a theme, remembering what happened. Not dwelling on a past, but growing from it. And then it became like this weekend, a healing weekend. And since that, it became an annual event. We gathered. Every year, at the approximate date, Cadbury's beatification, and around June the 22nd, whatever be the closest weekend. And this is what it's all about. Reconciliation with the past. And from there we presented to the Jesuits a petition that beside those martyrs, many of our people laid down their lives willingly for their faith. And there was a man that preceded those Jesuit martyrs, and that was Joseph Chiatin, misunderstood by his own people. Why? Because he was a great leader. He was a counselor, a chief. And he was chosen by the Great Spirit to understand what these missionaries were talking about in a way that his people couldn't. Thus he could relate that, interpret it into the language of the Huron. It was immediately that, I don't say converted, he was chosen, I believe, as one of the first in the ministry program of North America. He went into his tribal council boldly speaking about the new faith, knowing that he was being put down. And what brought upon his death was as his family was baptized, he started having other converts. His sister-in-law came to him, his brother's wife, and as they were baptized, a few days later they died. And he said, look what happened. You were cursed by those missionaries. They taught as they received baptism, it brought instant death, witchcraft, not realizing it was a plague that had entered the village. He continued like that for a few years until his untimely death. He thought it was worth dying for, a native church. A way how he could spread the good news of Scripture and still carry out his life in a traditional manner. We have our own saint, St. Catherine, that did likewise. She followed the ways of her people. She was traditional and was able to accept that faith. And then now, once again, we are being called to carry on. What had happened since the missionary came, I don't know. We do know there was a gap. Many of you who saw the movie, The Mission. I don't know if that was the politic of the church, what the order was disband. So there was a break in relationship with our people. History takes it from there. So we are answering that call that was brought by this elder of the church. We look in the Bible, New Testament, James. It's a very short chapter. In the last chapter, closing, it says, when anyone is sick in your community, call upon the elders. If anyone is in need of prayer or help, call upon the elders. And it is with their prayers, intercession to the Great Spirit, that healing will come. And that is what we've been doing, calling upon the elders of the church. And this is how the birth of the native church came back, through the effort of a man by the name Bishop Carter. Union people reverenced him so much that they had a naming ceremony, and he was named Vidala. That's another one of the books we're advertising. The Breaking of Dawn. And as they completed the chapel in the Anishinaabe Spiritual Center where we studied, it was christened in his honor. And we had a Cadre conference in Sudbury 3 years ago. Bishop Carter, in his old age, managed to attend with all the other elders of the native communities. And he was brought to tears as he was honored, again in an honor song. He brought tears. In the message he said, when you return to your villages this weekend, go back to your ways. So I guess we'll have to find our way home. And I think it's in finding our way home, back to our ways, that this native church will fully come alive. And thus the Catholic Church itself will come fully alive. We are only asking the Catholic Church to allow us to share with them the gifts that were given by the Creator before they too get lost. And be patient with us. And help us to develop that native hierarchy. Our message to them is, it's an investment. The church has difficult times now, as the church is dropped in numbers of leadership. The harvest is so plentiful today. The workers are so few. And as we develop our native church, our native leadership, we can go proudly among our people and look for more harvesters and take it, our leadership outside. I didn't realize what ministry was about. I knew a feeling of how our people are suffering and how we want to try and redeem them. Personally, I lost my own brother to alcohol like that, a younger brother. A family of 6 children. So you see, it's in a need that we come together. It's a need that we work together, support each other. And I went home angrily, not vengeful, to bury my brother, and be in the community, in the company where it happened and the people it happened with. Life taken away not by his own hand. And yet the law turned an eye blindly. However, the resurrection of it all was, it brought me home to a community that I had left with over 90% alcohol. And I came to a community hall, a lot smaller than this. I told my wife, I said, I wonder if this is where the thing is taking place, because we hear music coming out of the hall. So we approached the door, and I seen the coffin. I said, that's the place. But the music, maybe they're having I don't know. I walked in and no one was drunk. There was no alcohol, but they were having a prayer service, healing service. And I met my friend Dominic, my cousin Dominic and Richard Sayers, brother deacons today. They had been brought back from the desert. And here they were leading this healing. It's too much. Music went on till after midnight. Then some younger teenagers came in, all laughing. I said, maybe they had a smoke. No, they too took guitars and they continued on. And this went on all night. Then the next day until we had the funeral. What had happened? The Spirit of God working through the people. AA is a wonderful tool, but not AA alone. It was the Spirit from above that brought our people back to the ways of sharing, of reaching out. Today it is not 100% alcohol-free, but it's developed leadership. And when I went to the funeral of my uncle, the first ordained deacon by Alex Harder, 2 weeks ago, seeing the church full, and I was asked to speak at his wake. It was difficult, because I said I can't find words to speak about it. Being a simple man. Seeing all the children he was there, he had baptized. The people, he had comforted the families for over 60 years in the Ojibwe language, conducting wake services. It was after his 50th year that Bishop Carter said, we have to ordain him. He couldn't follow no theology course because he couldn't read or write in English. But the bishop recognized the Lord is certainly working within him. And I think this is how the church must come about. He was scared when he first accepted it. He was in his community where he lived. But today there are 5 deacons in that same community that were assisting at the funeral. The sanctuary was full of deacons and fellow priests. And you know what else? Our Episcopal vicar there, who had received his native rights back. His mom was a full-blooded Ojibwe. Before his coming, Bishop Carter had an English sector and a French sector to the diocese. Then he created a native sector. And he says, I am your bishop. And then as the Lord would want it to be, as he ordained the first native priest, my friend Milton McWatch, who we began study together at Anderson, Anishinaabe. 2 months before he was ordained priest, they appointed Father Don Orndorff to be the native Episcopal vicar for this diocese. Now we're speaking of, is there going to be a native church? No, it's in place. And as the center grows, each month they have a meeting of the sector, and they use it as teaching in the Indian language, using the Indian symbols rather. They're restudying and looking at the sacraments. They don't baptize every day. They do teachings. Each month becomes a teaching in the various sacraments. And it's bringing the elders together. And what happened through this program? It's developed a place not only for the Catholic, for the traditional, for all. Ministry weekends are held twice a month. The other weekends are for the youth leadership development. It's for the meeting place of the Indian Association of Ontario, alcoholics, drug and alcohol abuse, catechesis, you name it, it's going on. And that's a native church, I have to say, is fully alive. What can happen here? I think it's already happening.
Where is that?
The Spirituality Center is midpoint of Sudbury, not midpoint Sudbury, Nassau, but it's 45 miles, 1 hour west of Sudbury, Ontario, located 2.5 miles south of Espanola on Highway 6 on the route to Manitoulin Island. And within the town of Espanola is the town where that was where the present ministry program for the Diocese of Sault Ste. Marie is held. So when a bishop makes his route, he steps on into the next door. And now there's a lot of priestless communities in the North Shore. And our deacons now are ministering among their own in the community. And they're also ministering in the non-native communities. As priests are not able to be there each week, I'm glad to share that our people are there sharing that good news. A.M. Toby's been sick, as you all know, for many years. He was a young parish priest in West Island, and he still died a young priest, an oblate. Toby will be well remembered for his contribution to the Archdiocese of Montreal, as well as the papal altar at Martyr Shrine Midland. He was the fellow that designed that. And also to the Anishinaabe Spiritual Center. A lot of his architecture remains to be seen. Apparently his wake is at the Canton Shields Funeral Home, Kent Street, Ottawa. 179, then on to St. Bridget's Church in 179 Murray Street. The Mass will be at 2 o'clock Monday. So as you see, we're here for, we all have a certain number of days. Some of us are called home when we're fortunate at an early time. And some of us are called to stay on and suffer. So I guess they needed more architects upstairs. I guess they're redoing the Golden Gate, the main entry. They have quite a lot of difficulty. I'm telling you, in politics up there. St. Pierre, not just letting anyone get in there. Yeah, that's another story. You didn't hear that one? Tony? Oh, God. Well, there was a deacon from Ganawaki. He died. He went up, thought he was going in, and St. Peter said, you think you're coming in here? Well, it don't work that way. We got a point system. How do you like that for bilinguals, I mean? You need some points, 100 points to get in. So this deacon said, well, no problem, I'll get in easily, no problem. So he said, what did you do to make you feel you merited heaven? Oh, he says, I was the deacon. He said, for 10 years I made a grand voyage. That's Father John would say. To North Ontario, 1,000 miles every month for 10 years to follow in a ministry program to better serve the people of the East, Ganawaki, etc., etc. Well, he said, that'll be 1 point. Poor deacon. Can you just imagine at 1 point? 10 years. What else did he do? Well, he said during those 10 years, he said we had a crisis in 1990. You probably heard about it up here. Oh, excuse me.
Come on back, Josie, it's not that bad.
Well, he said I used to sneak through the barricades to hold healing services in the South Shore, trying to spread some good news to our fellow brothers in the English sector of Saint Jean de Longueuil. He said that's 1 point. Oh my God. He says, I think I got my answer. He said, then I had to put up with this busybody that caused me all this grief and work, this vicar, Monsignor John Walsh. You know, that guy took me through New Brunswick, he took me up the Grand Ballin, that's North Great Whale in English, or Kujawatapik if you're the other language. And trying to develop that ministry program, going in a Cursil. And if that was enough, go on a team. 1 point. Can you imagine that? Now you see why people aren't in a hurry to go up there. Can you imagine how the poor deacon felt? Well, he said, there sure is hell, actually. Sure as heaven no hope for me to get in here. I guess the only way I'll be able to get in here is through the grace of God. He said, I'd be 97 points. You had to be there. But I think the message of that is not to rest on our laurels. I guess we can begin the afternoon session. Wrap up. Finale. And at the end of the day, we'll be asking for some feedback on those evaluation sheets that you all have been following for these past few days. And you will become the resource. We'll call upon you for feedback. Give us direction. I'd like to call upon this time to recognize an elder within our community who I thought would be with us all weekend. But he tells me that 9 o'clock tomorrow he has to be in a pipe ceremony. You see, when you're an elder, they don't give you no rest. Willie Commander has to be back in Maniwaki for tomorrow morning early as they commemorate the opening of a new school. William commanded in Algonquin. He's also a pipe carrier. And he's the wampum carrier for the nation. Needless to say, but Willie's also a canoe maker. And I think he's one of the only few that's still surviving and keeping the tradition alive. And it was 1981 he made the birch bark canoe. Was it went on to Denmark? Exactly. I'm calling on an elder.
Watch your mouth.
He just lost a few points over there. There's a woman behind St. Peter. We're very honored to have William Commander join us in this very trying time. We're working hard to make this a strong beginning, and it's with great effort that he was able to make it last evening, and unfortunately won't be with us tomorrow, but he has his duties. He comes from a solid background in his type of work, and we're honored to have these kind of people give us a few words of wisdom. We like to hear his approach to life. He was a gentleman, he is a gentleman of many years, married to his beloved Mary. She died in April 29th, 89. They were married for over 49 years. Let's give them a hand for that and for Mary. With Bill's help, Mary made many beautiful things for Indian people. She made traditional garments, great pieces of traditional garments. Some of them are in museums, many are in museums. And he making these birch bark canoes. They used birch bark also to make the porcupine quill baskets that you see in museums as well. This is his beloved Mary and Bill. Now, Mary always stayed in the background for this type of stuff. Everybody knows Bill, but not many remember Mary so well. And it's called baskets that she made, but the source that they get, resources is getting very scarce. He's made many large birch bark canoes, like in Denmark when he made a large canoe for Queen Margarita. And when he told me about that venture, I said, well, we've had experience of people making great boats and it would sink. You know, I wondered about his big boat. But he said the day the boat was completed and it was launched happened to be tremendous winds in Denmark, and the boat climbed right over the waves like it was supposed to. And I guess we thank the Creator for his knowledge and finest touch in this type of thing, and surely made us very proud. Again, I am very honored to know that he has done a great deal of training, not just the craft that he knows so well, but he trains other people about his background and our Indianness. He has taught that over the years. He has made boats that are used for hunting, that can be carried and thrown back in the water, and people can use these boats as well as those that are in museums today. He's made some for the Bonaventure, Quebec House, Toronto Science Centers. You see these boats and you look for the signature, and it's Bill Commander's name is on there. We're very honored and pleased and happy to have Bill come up and say his share of good words. You know, come on, Bill.
Miłość mi kancelów nevemaduk. Cümleden. Yuşketu anti bir şey anış mamı hiç kime yok. Kanunu manesi muhadır mesutuyla yek. Vakıdı ya. İçimi besminen. Denajmanı dukina. Vingar mishitkina. Yuşketu anı kime oluştuğa. Wien में काविशमन independent. Kanin gay independent. Wien can never depend on can never have missions. The finish me with the name. First, I would like to pray before I want to tell you about part of myself and my life. Eternal Father, I want to thank you for your creation, for all the things you have created for my personal use. I want to thank you for creating the rivers and the lakes and the ocean, and also all the kind of living fish life and animal life that lives in the waters. And I want to thank you also for your winds, for direction winds. And I want to thank you, my four grandfathers, for all the things they taught me. A little bit that I know today. If I had probably listened more intently, I would have known better. But as much as I have learned, I have used. And I always thank you, Father, because only through you these things became possible. Without you, there is nothing possible. And I want to thank you, Father, for my wife, my father, my mother, all the things they have taught me also. And for lending us the children, because we don't own our children. To my way of thinking, Father, I own nothing. I am nothing. And I feel very humble when I meet my brothers and sisters. Because you have taught me in a few years past that the experience I had, that I should never think myself higher than my brother. I want to thank you for all your tenders, your whirlwinds, twisters, and earthquakes, by passing our localities that we were. Cannot say only we were lucky, because it's your will, Father, that we were not touched by these things. Because we had prayed for you. We pray for all the things that you have created for us. And with our prayers, became reality. And it became answered. It's holy good, Father. We still think today is the only way through you, asking sincerely from your heart, not only from the lips, to serve you and to talk about you sincerely. And we be able to tell the truth to our neighbors and our brothers, sisters, wherever we met. We thank you. Shalom. Yes, I was lucky enough to have learned from my grandparents and also my parents, father. And I have learned a lot of things also with my wife, because she had came from a family of also a different type of works that she was doing, which I was not so aware of, because I have learned my way, my people's way, my father's way, and also my grandfather. I did not learn so much about my own father because of fear. Because every time I used to take his knife, and I always had bad luck or something to happen to pass it on the stone or dull it, then I get a whip. So I preferred to work with my uncles. And when they used to make mistakes that way, and they told me, let's sit down, we're going to talk. And we'll tell you, this knife, this crooked knife, it's very useful, and you got to take care of it, because it will help you to make the things that you want to. And if you do, just throw it around and kick it around every evening you finish working, he says you don't respect your article, whatever you're using, and it's not going to be useful to you. All these things, it became a learning point for my parents. I was lucky enough, when I married my wife, she had already a son at 5 years old. And I have adopted a son who was already 5 years old when I married my wife. And we adopted my brother-in-law's daughter because he was going to sanatorium. And he had asked my wife to be able to keep a little girl while he would be in hospital, and she agreed. And he was there 7 years. After 7 years, she was already really tall. One day they came, tried to retrieve her back, bring her back home, and she grabbed my wife, Mary, by the leg. She said, I don't want to go. They're not my parents. You're my mother, and he's my father. And even though we always told her where she came from, we never hid nothing from her. But we brought her up with the way we thought best way to do it. Today she is teaching in the schools, and she's also a member of a school board, and she's part of spiritual healings among the children, just by listening to us talking with each other and what we've been saying. I remember when I was 8 years old, my uncle, the one I'm talking about, helping teaching me mostly at building a bush park canoes. In old days, in 1920, 25, 26, that's the first experience we ever see what the vehicles with 4 wheels. And he had bought one, a second-hand one, and every day he made a blowout, some sort. He was unlucky, and he always came at home to change put a new tube inside the tire, put a new tire. It happened to be badly busted. Then he threw away the rubbers, the tube. So my brothers and I, we pick up and make slingshots. And we were hunting chipmunks We were hunting squirrels, hunting birds, and we thought we were just doing great, trying to, at last we were hitting and other things like shooting with a rifle. We became so agile, like straight shooting with a slingshot because of practice. One day, them days when you look at a timber, it was so pure, you cannot see through it. A white spruce tree standing out there, and it was robin singing out there. And I went round twice the tree, tried to locate the robin. And this old man was coming, and he stopped at the road. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm trying to locate this robin that's sitting, singing in this tree up there." He says, "Come here and sit down with me." I thought maybe he was tired. I know he was probably over 80 years old. I went and sit beside him, and he had to go and notice a hand crawling on the ground, and he said to me, "You say this little hand that's crawling on the ground?" I said, "Yes." I said, "That hand you look at now," I said, "it could be an insect, very poisonous, it could be dangerous to bite." He said, "Do you like to go camping?" I says, "Oh yes, we go back there once in a while." I said, "We stay near the lake and go fishing or set a net and we go out camping." Or that insect I'm talking about says, while you're asleep, he could have crawled in the tent and then pick you and bite you. It might give you a very high fever. It might even kill you with a disease that you can attack from it. And that bird you're trying to locate on that tree up there is your lifesaver. Since it is the one that picks up all these things, so you could be free and you could be at ease and not worry to go to bed when you go to bed or camping, because they take care of all these things around you, so you don't have to worry about these things, because they're there to take care of these things. That's their job, given to them by the Creator. At that moment, I hate this man. I don't know why. I felt like I was using my slingshot against him. Only at a time when I heard that he had died. He died probably, he was pretty close 90. And then that hit me. Just like a snap, like that, what he was saying. What I was doing with the slingshot, everything was wrong. Because the chipmunk and the squirrel and all these birds were also created by the same Creator that had created me. I did not have the right to take away their life, because they was there doing their work for the Creator. We have all kinds of birds. We have some big ones, and we always thank the Creator for everything that flies with the wings, small and big. Some of them we eat, some of them we don't eat. But there is a reason why they are created. Some of them, you see them on the roads, other birds are being hit, or some animals being hit. And you see some of the crows or ravens picking up all the debris and cleaning out all the things that have been hit. So they're doing their job. But it's a matter of understanding it. A lot of us, sometimes it takes a little time. Up to 1982, August the 3rd, 8:30 in the morning, I had this funny experience. I know there was God, but I did not believe so much in it. About Elmira, I heard about these things, and I heard about Jesus, and even though I was baptized when I was 8 years old, but I did not really believe these things. But then 1982, July the 3rd, 8:30 in the morning, we were having this breakfast meeting with Pentecostals, and they invited me to go out there. And they said, "You want to come with us in Rome?" And all I was doing was holding myself like this and listening. And everybody was raising their hands just like this. And they were praying the language that I had never heard before. I was wondering, are they actors? And I started giggling. I started laughing at these people. I said, they must be just trying to fool somebody. But they don't fool me. Oh no, not me. And I began to feel that I was just raising up for my feet because my hand was like this, and I felt pressure in my elbows, and I was and getting heavier feeling, and at last my toes was barely touching the floor. Then I changed my mind then. And I began the fear caught me. Just like I put a cure of ice behind my neck out here, and all this cool water would run down my back and right down to my heels and my spine. And then I said to myself, I think I'm going to faint the way I feel. So I raised my hands and I started praying. I say, Winnie Johnson, walking in bed. I didn't remember the third word. I was jumping words because so long that I hadn't prayed. And while I was praying like this, and the tears was just dropping, would be just like, I don't know why I was crying, I didn't even know what was happening. Everything was just flowing down the floor. And then I heard this voice, like a visionary hearing, stating that only through me you're going to come to the Father. I didn't know nothing about the Bible, but I found it later on. It stated that only through me you will come to the Father. And I studied, when I said my Creator, a lot of people, a lot of us Indians saying, well, we're not talking about Jesus Christ. We're talking about only the God, Creator, Maker. not talking about other things, and just one God alone. And I opened one day the Gospel of St. John's. It tells me, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And I've seen that in this book, nothing was created because He did not create. Everything was made through Him, by Him. Then I begin to understand. Today, I have beliefs also, like what Father said here this morning. It's so true. All these things, at one time we don't have them, but we come with a little trouble and little understanding, and it becomes, because He shows us, through His will, and He chose us. We don't choose the Father, He chose us. After that I received to be carrier of the belt, and today I also carry the peace pipe. And I'm asked all over to visit and talk about these things and share these things with all my brothers. Either they're white, or black, brown, it's no difference. We are all people. And I think with dialoguing around the table, we made a lot of circle and talking each other. It's through talking that we understand each other. And the understanding becomes liking, and yet turns to love. Love, I get the love. I'm not talking about grabbing a woman and just live for a certain reason. It's not that at all. It's love through our Lord Jesus Christ. But love our Lord. Through Him, as I believe in Him. Because He said, I am in you and you're in me. And I believe this. And my wife, I was supposed to die in 1961. Them days I didn't believe no such thing. But my wife was a praying woman. She always had beads. And I'm going to show you these beads. Now she lost them for 2 years. One day, she used to get up before me. And she said to me, you're a bugger. You played me a trick, huh? I said, what did I do? I said, I lost these beads for 2 years now. And this morning when I pulled a chair to sit down for my breakfast, they were on the right in the middle seat. You put them there purposely, said, just to trick me. I said, I didn't know such thing. I didn't even know that she had lost them. She had talked about them, but it didn't mean nothing to me. But when I was supposed to die, 1961, I have a cancer right from the throat here, right down there, and it was diagnosed to be malignant. The doctors in Ottawa had told my wife I might make 2 weeks the most. And if I get operated, I might live 1 year, but not more than 2 years after. And that's 1961. And today I weigh 190. But through our prayers, even though I did not believe in a lot of things in days, through her prayers she had me cured, and also she made me medicines right from the herbs. And she did a lot of things. I think caring for each other is one of the biggest thing that a Creator wants from you. We always say, hey, you must be good, but it's got to come from somewhere. You can't do it alone. You can't do nothing alone. Through His will, these things happen. She died already past 3 years. And I have traveled mostly all Canada, all parts, east and west and south. I think I was privileged to try to forget about her. Even today, after 3 years, I feel she's standing right here beside me. Because she was something else. I think I have just about that to say. Thank you.
At this time, before I call our next speaker, I would like to take a minute to share with you nothing as tender as what Bill has experienced, but I was touched. Over the years, I've been an Indian all my life, you know that. But the Gadari business, I gave it lip service for many years. I've heard about her all my life. As an adult, I participated in the parish. I went to Rome with everybody. I helped at the parish for the cause. But it was not until I was threatened of a possibility of death. My husband, who worked on high steel all his life, fell in New York. I flew there. When I arrived, he was unconscious, and he had severe injuries. I mean, the thing crossed my mind, is he going to live? The question, is he going to walk? Is he going to get better? These things. I believe, even though I grew up in a convent, I had all this training, I knew all the traditional stuff that my people had, never did I pray with such a clear mind as I did then. Franciscans were in the chapel in the hospital, and I went there because I keep getting thrown out of the intensive care unit that was there. Only then did I look to Kadiri. Only then did I really look to Kadiri. I felt only she could understand where I was, and because she was Indian. Like I said, I've been an Indian all my life, but only then did I look to another Indian that only she could understand. And I made some vows then, in spite of all obstacles anybody lays, I will work for Kadiri's cause. I am not well right now, but I am here, and I will stay for this cause as long as I am able to. I may be all talk, but that's all I'm good for these days. And I'll never finish thanking Kadiri. My husband spoke one day. I was sitting there, he was unconscious, and all of a sudden he started to talk. He said, "I'm sorry I never got a chance to take you to see the redwood trees. It was our dream, we were poor kids. You know, he said, I'm sorry I never got to take you to see the redwood trees. I hope to see that someday." But that was a beginning. His noggin was okay. I didn't give a damn about anything else. He was coherent. They were pinching his legs every chance they got to make sure he wasn't paralyzed, and he was in a lot of pain, I'm sure. But all of a sudden, everything came together. Now, to me, in this room, my husband looks the best and looks the healthiest in this room today. He feels little, he has pain, but he walks, he is smart, he answers me back all the time. And in return, he is doing the worst jobs that nobody wants. He does for the church, and he worked the hardest to get the Knights of Columbus off the ground at Akwesasne during the worst time. Please meet my husband, he's over there. Man of few words. I have no doubt we're not going to enter any medical records. We're not going to tell anybody what a great cure that was. But it cured me of being uncertain about my belief, for having doubts or taken Kadiri for granted. It cured me, shot me right out of the water. And I will stay and work for this type of stuff as long as I am able to. He takes me everywhere because I need help. So here I am. If that's not testimony, that's my best, and I'm happy to share it with this kind of group. We are very honored and happy to have in our midst Father McCrory from Toronto, who has worked with our Indian people for quite some time and has no qualms about being with us, and you have to hear him to realize how okay he is. Please make welcome Father McCrory.
Well, I really have no expertise, but I was given a great privilege. I was given the gift from the Creator to be able to travel around this country and to visit First Nations communities, Inuit communities, Métis communities, and to see the power of God at work. It was a great privilege, and what I'm doing now is reflecting on it. I was thinking of William. I was in William and Mary's house, and I had the privilege of seeing the wampum. And at Maniwaki, the people had organized a special, in the hall, they organized a special tribute to Katari, and they had trees in there and some statues of Katari. Very well, tastefully done. And we had Mass there, and I stood beside Willie while he was praying. And I know, if you ever stood beside Willie when he's praying, you wish you could hear what he was saying to God. You wish you were God almost, because you knew it was Willie and God talking together. I think of a funny moment afterwards. We were leaving with Father Paiement to go up to Emmaus, and Father John Haskell was with us. And we got to a crossroads, big highway, and Father Paiement got a little confused, and he slowed the car down to about 5 miles an hour, where he was figuring which way he should go. And just then a great, big, huge tractor trailer was obliged to go past us on the shoulder, about 60 miles an hour. And as the tractor trailer went past, it went a big blast with his horn. And poor Father Paiement, who was in the middle of the road, almost stopped. Well, John Haskell was in the back, and he laughed for about 10 minutes. He found it so funny with this. We could have killed just like that, just mashed. But John reacted with great laughter for a long time. We've always shared that moment when we almost met our Creator ourselves. But earlier, Ron mentioned the pilgrimage to Lake St. Anne. And I'd like to tell you more about it, because the East and the West don't get together very much. Apparently that was called Manitou Lake. It was a lake that the Cree recognized there was a special presence of the Spirit. And the waters of that lake could heal. And so an oblate priest connected that healing power up that the Cree had recognized there to St. Anne and called it Lake St. Anne. And a pilgrimage began about this will be, I think, the 103rd year. I think on the anniversary, the estimates of people who came went as high as 100,000. 100,000, and that's native people. And they come from as far as the Northwest Territories. They come from the States. They come across all the western provinces. And in that beautiful place by the lake, they camp. It's quite a sight to see 5,000 campfires. The Dene come with their tents, and they build their little villages in the traditional style in a circle. The Chippewan come and go to their villages. Everyone has their place. And they know where to go, and they know they're going to see their relatives, and they come all ages. What is very vibrant is the number of young people. And they pray. And when I showed some of the video I had taken to some of my friends in another part of Canada, they said, we used to be like that 30 years ago. This is the spirituality of the people of the North, who are much more open about talking to God in public. And what was very special last year is that Archbishop Sutton, at a certain moment, the bishop is expected to bless the lake. And the bishops had usually gone out in a rowboat, whereas the people walked out, fully clothed. And the bottom of the lake is not very pleasant. There's rocks in it, big rocks, and you have to walk very carefully if you're in bare feet. So this year, Bishop Sutton, when it walked out with all of his bishop's robes, he walked up to about here. He said a beautiful prayer to the Creator, a magnificent prayer, asking the Creator to bless the water and to heal us all. And the sun was setting. And it was an amazing moment, because your feet were touching Mother Earth. You were immersed in her water, her lifeblood. And the sun was, the light of the sun, everything was together. And you could feel yourself becoming one with all of God's creation. And the bishop was praying, and hundreds of people were in the water, up to here. For days, people had been going into the water. Old people would be helped into the water. Villages would come in and go as a whole village into the water together. They would pray the rosary. They would do all kinds. So these are 4 or 5 days of intense prayer. And then one day, all of a sudden, all the tents fold up and the Winnebagos close, and the school buses everybody goes away to the next Often there are other places of pilgrimage in the West. So it's a magnificent time, always centered around July 26th, and always centered on the Wednesday closest to the 26th, the feast of St. Anne, Jesus' grandmother. But Ron also mentioned Our Lady of Guadalupe. And that too is a story that we haven't appreciated. In 1521, a handful of Spanish conquistadores, these were people who had already fought for about 7 centuries to get the Islamic people out of Spain. And they were toughened and hardened and expert in war. They had steel swords, sharp as razors. And they had mail, steel armor, head to toe. And they had vicious dogs. And they had, and this was shocking to the Aztecs, they had horses. And when Cortez and his men saw the city, Mexico City, they think the population might have been as high as 500,000. They were stunned at it. There was no city in the world so big. This was an Indian city, an Aztec city, that was the biggest city in the world at the time. Paris might have been a couple of 100,000. All of Spain only had 6 million people. In the Aztec Empire, there were 20 million. This was a big When the Spanish saw that city, they were aghast at its beauty and all these canals and these castles. They couldn't get over the beauty of the place. And in some strange way, because of that steel and those horses and those cannons and the dogs and some luck and disease, within a year or so, that great empire had fallen. And it was under the control of these Spanish conquistadores, who came, I'm ashamed to say, with the cross and with the sword, and crushed those people. And the God that they brought was a God of the conquistadores, a kind of a tough, harsh God, a macho God. And the poor Aztec people, proud, very spiritual people, were crushed. And they must have been, so many were dying from smallpox, that same disease that hit here so powerfully, terribly. Estimates go as high as 90% of the people were killed over the years, over the decades. You can imagine the despair that was in their heart. So in 1531, 10 years later, a 57-year-old man who had become Christian, he was a catechist, was coming to Mass. He was not too far from the center of the city, but on the outskirts of the city. And his name, by the way, is not Juan Diego. That's the Spanish name. I wish I could say his name in Nahuatl, his own language. His name is, and this is very beautiful, Talking Eagle. That was his name, his real name. The eagle who speaks was his name. He was passing by a hill. Now this hill was associated with the mother of the Aztecs gods. It was already a holy place with a little temple on the top of it. So this was a holy place where the Aztec mother of their gods was connected with this place. As the man who was called Speaking Eagle came past this hill, he suddenly thought he was in heaven because he heard beautiful music, birds singing. And he saw this beautiful light, and he smelled this beautiful odor. And there on the hill was this beautiful woman speaking to him. She wasn't above him or below him. She was right on the same level, face to face. And she was not Spanish and she wasn't Aztec. She was both. She was mestizo. And overhead, he saw the sun somehow connected, and the moon was there. And because she had a black piece of a sash around her waist, he knew that she was pregnant. And her garment was pink, which is like a new dawn, the color of dawn for the Aztec. And there was the pattern of her dress was a sacred flower to the Aztec. There were a million touches, and this was on the hill of the mother of their gods. And she said, she had told Speaking Eagle who she was. And she said, I have compassion and mercy for you and for all your people, and for all peoples. I have seen their suffering. I am here to help you. So instead of this stern, stiff, macho God of the conquistadores, here was this gentle, loving, compassionate female side of God. On the hill, as I say again, that the Aztecs had connected to the mother of their gods. And we know in the book of Revelation in chapter 12 that Mary appears with the sun and with the moon. And she's about to give birth. And so in a way, God was, just like Mary came before Jesus, here was Mary coming before Jesus was to give birth to a new church in this world. It wasn't a new world, they call it the new world, it was as ancient as any world. But in this world, Jesus was going to come forth. So she asked Speaking Eagle to have a church built on that hill. And he was to go to the bishop. Zumarraga was his name. He was a Franciscan, brand new bishop. They'd only been there 10 years. But he went into the city and he followed the message, and of course the bishop laughed at him. Especially because Mary didn't speak Spanish, she spoke Nahuatl, she spoke Speaking Eagles. So he went back home in great embarrassment. He found that his uncle, and this is very important because you know the importance of uncles in their culture. It was like his father. His uncle was dying of smallpox. And so he had to go and get the priest. And he had to pass by this hill. But he didn't want to see that lady anymore. If she wanted the messenger, he probably thought she better get somebody a little better than me. So he was trying to avoid the hill. I find that very humorous. He was trying to get away from her. He had to go past her. He was trying to avoid her. But she came to him. And she said, "Where are you going?" And he told her. And she said, "Don't worry, your uncle," he was healed at that moment. So this was another very important sign, the healing. And she showed him some roses, Castilian roses that grew in Spain in the middle of winter. And she helped him put them in his coat. We call it a tilma. They're way, there's a long, just a straight piece of cloth, with a hole in the middle for the head. It was just like a square blanket that they still wear. And she told him to take out his tilma, and she filled that up. She picked the flowers and put them in his tilma and said, "Don't show this to anybody, bring it to the bishop." And he had a hard time when he got to the bishop's house. They wouldn't let him in. They knew what he was coming for. They didn't pay attention to him. But they peeked in and saw the roses. They were stunned. And so he was allowed in to see the bishop again. And when he took down the tilma, there was this life-size painting of the Virgin he had seen, exactly the same way. And then the bishop was impressed. What is marvelous about that painting, they don't know how the paint got on the cloth. And they don't know why the painting is still very fresh. And the detail is so astonishing that in her eye, you know how the eye reflects? There's a picture of Speaking Eagle in her eye. So that you can see that picture still now the city of Mexico City has grown around that hill. And the basilica is there, and it's quite amazing to prevent crowds from staying there too long. There's a moving sidewalk. And you come downstairs from the upstairs church, and you step onto this moving sidewalk, and it moves you past the picture slowly. And you can say your prayer there if you wish, but in order to prevent people from staying there all day, because there could be so many problems, crowd control, you have to move, and then you come up the other side. The bishop did not want to build a Catholic church where there had been a native temple. And it took many years before the basilica finally was built. They built a little oratory, and then a chapel, and eventually a basilica. But they didn't, you see, they couldn't get it in their heads that Mary could come to the Aztec way. And so in this century, in this country, we're wrestling with this problem of how do we combine ancient traditions that come from the Creator with the gospel. And Mary did it already. There were so many touches of her reaching out to Speaking Eagle and to his people. Within a century, 8 million, there were 8 million baptisms. I think it was 70 or 80% of the native people became Christian because of this apparition. There's not a house in all of Latin America, if the people, it doesn't matter if they're white, if they're Indian, if they're black, or what they are, there's not a house in Latin America that doesn't have a picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Every car, and everybody, and they might not even be believers, but they have to have that picture. There might be no other picture in the house, they're so poor. There has to be a picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So, and this is a Mary, by the way, who's not a soft, kind of passive object. When they take out that picture, they mean